Thanks for coming, you guys. I know it's a little bit late in the festival schedule and inauguration madness and all that, but I'm really excited for this panel. We have great talent up here. We're covering the subject of outsiders in film, which I'm sure that is something that many of us can relate to. Certainly, it's a sort of theme that Sundance nurtures. So let me introduce our panelists. You may have heard of Dare, which is I saw last night and I really enjoyed. We have the writer and the producer of Dare, which is one of the few high school comedies I can remember to pivot on a menage a trois between the jock, the straight-A student, and her gay best friend. So please welcome David Brind and Mary Jane Skalski. And you may know our next two panelists from one of the most talked about and raved about films at the festival, Push, based on a novel by Sapphire, which I think is screening another public screening tonight, and is full, but beg, borrow, and steal to get in, because it's great. It's Lee Daniels' second film as a director. He started with Shadowboxer, and as a producer before that, he was responsible for Monsters Ball and The Woodsman. As for his star, Gabrielle Sidibe, this is her first film, but she more than holds her own at everything that Push throws at her, including a very heavy TV set heaved up the staircase. So please welcome both Lee Daniels and Gabrielle Sidibe. And it's rare that you see a director's first feature film that's as confidently directed and stylish as the slam dance entry City Rats, but our last panelist was well known for his work on television and advertisements before he chose this script to make his directorial debut. Please welcome Steve Kelly. So I'm going to start with David and Mary Jane because I know Mary Jane is playing hooky right now. She has a film that's screening right now, and you get to get back for the Q&A after, so I appreciate it. I want to talk a little bit about the structure of Dare because it plays with a lot of familiar high school archetypes. I mentioned a couple, but what I like about it is that you sort of see their stories in order. You know, you see some of them like the gay best friend or the jock, and they're introduced and they still seem like these sort of opaque stereotypes. And later on, you get to see that there's much more going on, and in fact, the jock seems to me to be like the most subverted one. Later on, you see that he's the biggest outsider of them all, so maybe you can talk a little bit about how you structured it.
Yeah, I definitely, this came from a short that was also called Dare, that was very much kind of a gay short, and that's how it was seen. And in shooting the short, and I produced the short as well, the character of Alexa was a very peripheral character. She's kind of the good girl, and the best friend of the gay guy. And she took root in my head after making the short, and I was really interested in her relationship with Ben, the outsider who's gay. And then what really interested in me is this trio of these three characters. And I guess in high school we all go through this. It's a very intense time where we're mostly consumed with ourselves and how we are seen, how other people see us, how we're treated, what's our position, what's our place, and we rarely kind of think about the idea that we could impact someone else, especially not the jock or the bad boy, because they just seem untouchable and unreachable in every way. So what I wanted to do was kind of look at each story and get into the heads of each character as they saw one another. And then as you get from one to the next, you kind of see that there's this cascade of impact, that certainly the good girl who is kind of ostracized as being such, and the outsider who is gay, have no possible idea that they could affect in any way the bad boy and the jock. And certainly I think we've all experienced, everybody has that guy in their life or girl in some way. And I was particularly interested in unpeeling him because when you go home alone, you don't know what other people are feeling or thinking. And when they're home alone at night and what their life is like, you can't impact them. And you have to at some point take responsibility for that, whoever you are.
Mary Jane, you also produced Mysterious Skin. Is there something about sort of that time period around high school that we're drawn to because we felt like we were the biggest outsiders then?
I think it's in that in some ways, but also like what I love about that characters who are that age is that even when, in the case of Mysterious Skin where there's truly horrible things happening or have happened, or in Dare where, people are so caught up with what's going on in their lives that it's at that age you have so much enthusiasm and joyousness in your life, and I love that. I love trying to get that on film, and there's such an extra layer of that, because even when you are, like in the case of Mysterious Skin, these people who are really damaged, but yet they still have the youthful exuberance and no matter where they're at, and I love that. Like, I love that at that age, those things can still exist.
I mean, Lee, Push is set during the same time period. How would things have been different if it were 5 years later? Is there something that's more irrepressible about someone who's still in their teens? There's still more that they can overcome at that point before they start getting beaten down?
It wouldn't have been the story because she's a 16-year-old girl, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. I mean, in theory it could have worked, but it wouldn't have had the impact, I don't think. We're more sort of into her head and feeling a sense of sadness for her and her struggle at 16.
Something I've noticed that I think is kind of strange is when you see high school films that are feature films, they tend to focus on the outsider. But when you watch high school television shows like Gossip Girl or the new 90210, it's like the popular, rich, attractive kids. What is the difference? How would you account for that?
It's interesting because, like, I always think that TV is, like, in some ways you watch TV for your fantasy, but then you go to the movies and you seek out the movies for, like, for your kinship, for your reality. So I think maybe in some ways it's that.
I agree. My kid, I have twins that are 13, and they're always watching that Disney shit. Then they love it, and I think it's great. But then I freak them out by showing them, let's sit down and watch Valley of the Dolls. Let's sit down and watch Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, and they just sit there with their eyes open, like, what kind of dad do we have? I think it's important that they have a sense of the sickness, my sickness in filmmaking early on. I think it shows a different side, because they're really, like you said, we're so. If you just sit on the TV and you're watching this Disney stuff, you turn on TV, it's Disney it's all to escape. Yeah.
Well, in this day and age of film where increasingly movies have to be like these big tentpole releases, how do you push something through that is about these specific outsiders? Or is it easier because things have become so niche-y that there's always going to be like a certain movement that you can pitch your films to?
Well, it's never easy. I think, Lee, also, it's like you just know from the get-go. You, read it and you're like, well, there's a whole world of financing that is never going to be interested. So it's like, well, I'm not going to waste my time there. So it's just that. You're just forever finding, like, a whatever group you think it might be likely, when you're looking at a project and saying, okay, this is how this project's going to get made. If it's going to get made, it's only going to get made sort of in this way. So here we go. And there's a world there I'm going to ignore because it's going to waste my time.
Now, Lee, you've spoken about how the novel Push, that it felt akin to Roots to you. Roots is a big, sprawling, but a communal novel. This is something very specific, but tell me about how you feel that they relate to each other.
Roots, because I think it's an epic story. I think it's a story that hit me in the same effect that Roots did, or that The Color Purple did, except it wasn't directed by a white guy. It was told by a black guy. And I think it's important now that we tell, this is as important as Roots, or the story is as strong as Roots, but it was all directed by white guys, and white guys will direct black people a certain way, and there's a dynamic that you have, whether we like it or not, that we have. There's a truth that's there that we speak behind closed doors, another face that's put on.